Our next talk, and I have the honor of interviewing these two, although we have a last-minute replacement. Shashaya is her name. Cairon is with us as well. And we are now going to be talking about NFTs and the opportunity in emerging markets. And as I mentioned, you're going to be specifically, how can I put it? You're going to be excited to hear what's happening in Africa. I'll leave it at that. So without further ado, give them a warm welcome with a round of applause, Cairon and Shashaya. It's almost like we have too much choice of seats here. How do we want to do this? Excellent. So we'll start off by finding out who is on stage with us. So we'll start with you, Shashaya. How would you define yourself?
Okay, so I come from a very multi-sector background. I worked for the Philippine Embassy in the Department in Trade Investment side of things. I helped essentially get British investors to invest in the Philippine market as an emerging market, covering sectors such as oil industry, natural resources, also SMEs, entrepreneurs. And I've also been a headhunter for the construction industry, and I worked within real estate and blockchain as of recently, but my background is law. So an amalgamation of multiple things, which helps a lot when it comes to the operations and strategy side when speaking with Web3 startups. So, yeah.
Wow. Good luck following that.
Top that.
That is one resume. That's very impressive. So, Cairon, try to top that.
Yeah, I'm trying. Going to be difficult. So not necessarily from Web3 background, but I guess looking at Web2, worked predominantly in fintech, wealth management, investment management on the technological side of things. Worked on actually building a real estate fractionalization platform, which is currently going through FCA regulation. And more recently and separately working on a creation service for African artists to actually create NFTs, do the whole end-to-end of minting, design, onboarding, offboarding in terms of financials as well. So not as extensive as you, madam, but more kind of moved into the Web3 space and kind of seeing how we can take traditional models and actually bringing them in on-chain and providing value and liquidity in that side on the real estate side, and then separately looking at how we can actually bring some of the value from musical artists, musicians, designers, creatives to the forefront of the world, really.
And you talk about the forefront of the world. Now, many of us would have heard about investing in India this year. That was a hot topic about why at least Western civilization should be looking to India. So I'm going to ask the difficult question, and we'll start with you first, Shashaya, which is, why should we be looking at emerging markets, and more specifically, Africa as a continent to invest in?
So I can't speak specifically for Africa, but I can share some insights for the Philippines, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So I'm actually currently a founder in residence for an investor company called Entrepreneur First. They're very similar to Y Combinator, except they believe in investing in people pre-idea. So their investment thesis is that if we get all the best people in one room, the likelihood of them producing multi-million/unicorn startups is very high, because they all come from different sectors and different backgrounds. And one of the things I ended up exploring with a CTO was smart cities, and how we can combine blockchain technology and utilizing that for better governance within emerging markets such as the Philippines, for example, where corruption is rampant, and also there's a lack of education around technology access in general. So to answer your question, Jordan, I would say that the reason why we should invest in emerging markets, perhaps specifically for Web3, is that it's an untapped market. So just to give you some statistics, I believe, don't quote me, you can Google, maybe I'm right, but I believe that 52% of the population in the Philippines are unbanked, but 120% of the population owns smartphones. So you can do the maths. It's ridiculous that everyone has access to a phone, but no one has access to banks, right? So then we're talking about NFTs and the possibilities of DeFi protocols being implemented and using that technology to help farmers, for example, who still go on ground using documents, exchanging those documents with one another, and not even getting some of their harvest to the market because of lack of infrastructure. And so when we have things such as NFTs that can facilitate better movement, it just makes so much sense, in my opinion.
And before we come to you, Cairon, just really quickly for the audience. So you've sold me on why I should be looking at the Philippines, but how can someone in the audience right now get involved with some of those investment opportunities? Are there some websites, organizations you can point us in a direction?
I think right now it's very difficult because there are only very few organizations or NFT projects that are targeting emerging markets, which I think bringing the opportunities and helping people understand why it's such a good market to tap into is the first hurdle. Because even from my understanding, there's not a lot of talk within governments right now when it comes to Web3 technology, because when an emerging market such as the Philippines already lack the infrastructure and we're talking about Web3, there's like a data fragmentation issue there, right? So then I would say that first, really understand your intentions in this market and why you're bullish in Web3 to begin with, and then finding the intersection of your reason and the social impact aspect that could be there, if that makes sense. I hope I'm just not sounding like I'm bullshitting.
Does she sound like she's BSing? We got a solid no there. Okay, I think they're being polite. Cairon, same question to you. Why and how should we be paying attention to emerging markets?
I think the opportunity, and I'll speak from two perspectives in terms of emerging markets. So the first piece I want to talk about is like the whole land sector and some of the issues that you have predominantly in emerging markets. So I can speak for Africa in the first instance. So particularly in terms of ownership, right? So blockchain ownership, land ownership, registry title, clean title, KYC, all that sort of thing can be very easily achieved with the correct balance between on-chain and off-chain. Looking at, particularly within Nigeria, you walk around, you literally see signs that say, this land is not for sale, beware of 419. So, and I was
going to say, what does that mean?
Before I say 419 is fraud, right? It's the code for fraud. So you get a lot of people that will, double, triple sell land titles. I've actually had it to somebody that I know. So they've actually gone and spent about 30,000 on a piece of land and found out that it was actually someone's chief's uncle that actually owned the land when they actually got down to the real title, and actually providing that transparency in terms of who the land ownership belongs to, and looking at what the previous title was, how much it was sold for, when it was sold. All of that can be very easily digitized and captured on the blockchain, which is why I think there's value. And that's the real opportunity on the continent, really. And then providing liquidity as well on the back of that. So you have the whole KYC element. You have a liquidity that can be provided on top of it in terms of actually selling some of those units. And then separately as well, looking specifically at the opportunity for me in terms of music, which is the other side I want to touch on, is that there's so much value in terms of, I think we've seen, Amapiano, Afro beats is pretty much taking over the world in terms of the music now. We're seeing artists such as Chris Brown that are partnering with African artists. Davido has done a lot of work with American artists as well. I think it started maybe, was it like 3-4 years ago, where Chris Brown did a song with, I can't remember the name. But there's been, it started about 3-4 years ago, but more recently, we've seen a lot more Afro-American collaborations. And I've partnered with Burna Boy. I'm not sure if you guys know who that is, but Burna Boy's producer, who won a Grammy, he had a Grammy award-winning album. And we actually, partner with artists on the continent to actually, show their craft to the rest of the world. One of our partners for our first project was Cent.co. So Cent.co, they tokenized, everyone in the crypto space has heard of this. They tokenized Jack Dorsey's tweet 3 million. It was that one his tweet's been tokenized, and I want to tokenize my tweet as well, make 3 million as well, but nobody else did it. So we partnered with them on that project to actually, get some American buyers, people that were also interested and bring some additional value and use case to the music in Africa. And I think there's a real opportunity because there's so much talent and not really a way for them to showcase their talent. So with NFTs and the rise of technology, we're able to very quickly distribute music, where previously you would have had to go to a record label. Record labels don't necessarily want to A, invest in you, B, distribute your music, and the propagation of that music across the world is quite difficult. So I think there's a real opportunity there for up-and-coming artists and established artists to collaborate. What we've done is we actually have a music camp next month in South Africa, where we've got 4 of the top artists from South Africa, 4 of the top artists from Nigeria, so Tenny the Entertainer, who's got like 5 million followers, Bodge, who was on the song with Dave, then we've got Young Stunner, Shago, who are like the top artists in South Africa as well, from like an Amapiano perspective. And we're working, you know, to create like some amazing music. We've seen Sony do this, create these music camps where we create EPs out of the back of it, and working with Boomplay in Africa, who've got 75 million followers, to actually, you know, showcase those NFTs and that EP out of the back of it with additional utility to provide NFTs to the continent, so people can, you know, kind of listen to that music, purchase the NFT, and yeah, really the opportunity is just there.
A follow-up question for the both of you, because the opportunity is there, whether it's in the Philippines or now South Africa with the music camp that you're putting together. As an investor, there's a difference between being a consumer, so buying the collection when it drops, and investing in the infrastructure. And that's, of course, where investors make their money, right? Where it's being built on top of. What opportunities from an investor standpoint can people put their money to, how can I say, be part of the network effect? So I'll come to you again first.
It's quite difficult because I wouldn't know. Just because in the Philippines right now, there does seem to be a disconnect between Web3 and the talks around Web3, the talks around NFTs as well specifically, just because the mainstream media has posited this space to just be JPEGs, right? And scams and rugs and all of the negative things associated with it, which we know that's not all there is to it. And I think, just to kind of circumvent your question, I think that we need to think of, yes, real-world use cases, but the real-world use cases that can really have the most impact when it comes to Web3 technology is actually directly for emerging markets. So I've been having conversations, and it's been quite frustrating because specifically also in a cohort that I'm in with an investor company, the Web3 stream all seem to just want to build wallets and DeFi protocols and all of these things that they're essentially building in a silo, they're building for themselves. And the issue with that is when you're only exposed to the things that you know of in this space, that you know works, it prevents you from exploring other means. So when Cairon's talking about the applicability of NFTs and how that can really change the land registry or real estate in Africa or Nigeria specifically, it's the same thing in Malawi, that they deal with the same issues. And in the Philippines also it's the same. So my dad, just to put it into context, he bought a piece of land, I think it's like 2 hectares, under my name when I was younger. And we now no longer have access to that land because we've been here for so long and people have just squatted there. So even if we have the land deed, they basically just say, well, you haven't done anything with the land. And even if the deed proves ownership, is lack of activity there that's basically like ushered us out. But if we're utilizing things like NFTs to show ownership that's on a blockchain, is immutable, you can't really change it, and the direct ownership is there, then there is massive potential for that. And the Philippines is made up of like 7,000 islands. That's a lot of fucking land for you to get a hold of, right? Like that's a lot of land for you to create as NFTs. Like it seems logical in my opinion. Logical is different to practical. But yeah, that would just require your do your own research kind of thing. That.
And talking about that practicality, I know one incredible blockchain, Algorand. They are working with the government in Nigeria to put the entire IP of Nigeria onto the Algorand blockchain. So that's one example of an infrastructure where investing in the Algo token and the success of course, Nigeria's IP and so much more can increase utility, which would then hope the price of the Algo token would increase. What infrastructure are you seeing being built in Africa where either you're personally investing in or you have got your eye on it?
So I think there's 2 kind of key infrastructures that I'm looking at. The first is, so everybody, maybe not, but a lot of people kind of know the initial stance of the CBN, right? Like most emerging countries, ban crypto. We don't want nothing to do with it. It's not allowing us to get the revenues in terms of tax. So because they're not making money from it, we're going to ban it.
Say that one more time. So they're not interested for what reason?
In my opinion, and I guess a lot of people in Nigeria's opinion, because the CBN were not able to effectively tax crypto.
And that's the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Central Bank of Nigeria, sorry, apologies. Were not able to effectively tax crypto. Their first instance was, people are making money without being adequately taxed. We will ban it, right? So now what I'm seeing is and a few companies that I kind of know and work with separately, is they're working together to kind of build a centralized kind of registry and an exchange for crypto and land. And what they're doing is they're working with people that are already doing that and purchasing the information that they already have, right? So there's two ways you can do it. You can either go out as a government and decide, we're going to do it all ourselves, take on a big project, loads of cost, loads of risk, or we can identify the companies that are doing it and buy the data from them, right? To bring it all into one kind of centralized platform. So from my perspective, I see the opportunity being kind of investing in those platforms that are doing that kind of thing, and getting involved in, I guess, the decentralized protocols that, provide the value in terms of like land registry and all the surrounding things around it. So not just the registry, but also, kind of the legal companies that need to do it, because people can write smart contracts, but there will always need to be that on-chain, off-chain aspect to real estate. It can never just be, this is the blockchain, this is the reality. There's always going to have to be like SPVs that are created and kind of companies that can legally hold the assets that are underlying, right? So that's the first aspect I see. The second aspect I see, and I thought of initially, was kind of marketplaces, so other NFT marketplaces. But what I've realized is that everyone is creating a marketplace. And what I think we'll see is the really big kind of companies, so multinationals such as Meta, for example, all of the smaller kind of companies where, they've got, 100,000 NFTs on the platform, they will end up dying out. The liquidity will be completely drained from there, and they will be moved to the larger, Google when they probably start doing NFTs, Meta that are now doing NFTs, all the liquidity will drain out of there. So I think there's an opportunity as an investor to probably buy more shares in those kind of companies, as I think the shares will go up over time. That's kind of what I think, really.
I didn't expect that. So you're giving financial advice
I'm not.
to everyone to buy Meta right now?
I'm not giving financial advice.
It's a great entry, right? So it's a good reminder to look ahead and say, okay, right now, if we look at Meta and we say, the stock price is falling, they must be losing. But we understand that present results do not dictate future outcomes.
Correct.
Right? And I like your hypothesis that potentially that liquidity is going to be sucked up by these FANG companies,
100%.
right? Okay, you heard it here. We heard it here. So, Cairon, I'll come back to you to give you some time to prep your final answer, which is, if there's one last thing that you want the audience to remember about emerging markets and NFTs, or either or, what would that be? No. We came to you. Chivalry is dead.
One last thing is to put them on the same standing as we do with, like, American companies. So looking at, obviously the price point is lower, right? So realistically, the price point of NFTs generally within Africa is going to be lower because there's less capital per person. So even specifically looking at the project that we're doing, where we partner with Boomplay, the cost of the NFT is a lot lower because their monthly subscription is a lot lower. I.e., Spotify in the UK, we're going to spend £20 a month. Boomplay for Africa, they spend $1.50 a month. So there's that disparity. And even Twitter, actually, sorry, I'm rambling on a bit. Even Twitter, so the whole point about the green tick that Elon Musk said, it's going to be $8 a month. Looking at emerging markets, we will reduce that cost. So I think the opportunity is there, and it shouldn't be overlooked because the price point is lower or because it's not as widestream right now, because it will definitely catch up. And that's what I want to say.
Beautiful. So it's a longer play.
100%.
It's a longer play. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a longer play when it comes to emerging markets, right? I spoke with an angel investor who specifically invests in Africa, specifically Nigeria also actually, and I mentioned to him an idea that I had, and he said, do you really need a VC for this? And I said, well, if I want to leverage advisors and investors, probably yes. And he said, well, I can give you money tomorrow. And I said, that's great, but the ROI will probably be 5 years from now. And he said, okay, actually, I might not have 5 years to wait until to see the X, Y, and Z amount that he really needs to see after that, right? And so it's always going to be a longer play. That's my opinion. But also, I think one last thing that I wanted to specifically mention is that pretty much echoing what Cairon has already said is don't neglect the large opportunities in emerging markets just because it is sometimes often the last mind or last thought that people have when it comes to new technology. But what I would say is that for us, NFTs are a privilege. Being in this space, it's a humbling experience for me coming from an emerging market. But for emerging markets and the people in there, NFTs can actually be life-changing. So if we're able to provide a way to find the intersection of new technology and social impact that can benefit an entire population with just new ways of thinking and new ways of living, then you'll most likely be very successful as an investor for an emerging market.
Super. And with that note, I feel the pressure from the new host.
No pressure, no pressure.
We're going to have to wrap it up now, but the main takeaway message is the emerging markets NFTs should be part of your portfolio, and it makes up the complete picture. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.